What's up, everybody? Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook here. Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, head over to ESPN3 as I'll be the color analyst for the Monmouth Gardner-Webb ball game. Again, that's 1 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app. Be sure to order your copy of the Go-Go Offense by Coach Brennan Marion on footballgameplan.com/GoGoOffense. Coach Marion goes through the ins and outs of his explosive offense, one that's tearing up the college football field and putting a lot of points on the scoreboard. Again, you can order your copy at footballgameplan.com/GoGoOffense.
Welcome to the FCS Kickoff Show. I'm David Hassagen, and this is the 4-Minute Offense. Week 7 in the CAA was definitely affected by the full moon this weekend because it was nothing but chaos across the entire conference. All 4 ranked teams who faced unranked opponents, Maine, Delaware, Towson, and Stony Brook, lost last week, and sometimes by as much as 35 points. However, the only conclusion that anyone can decipher from last week is that by far the CAA has become the strongest conference in the FCS. Every conference game is now critical, with 9 of the 12 teams at this point able to make an argument that they belong in the FCS playoffs. Key matchups to watch this week include UNH traveling to Delaware, William & Mary hosting James Madison, and Richmond taking on Yale. Before the season began, no one gave Sacramento State any chance to play a factor in deciding the teams making the FCS playoffs in the Big Sky. Even fewer thought that Sac State would even be one of those teams in contention for one of those spots. However, nobody told the Hornets, who have crashed the Big Sky title party after knocking off number 22 Eastern Washington and number 6 Montana State in back-to-back weeks. Add to that taking 2 FBS teams to the brink, including now nationally ranked Arizona State, and one can see why so many have first-year head coach Troy Taylor as a Coach of the Year candidate. Junior quarterback Kevin Thompson has thrown for 19 TDs this season with just 4 interceptions, and is also the offense's rushing leader. On defense, senior lineman George Obina has been a force, recording 8.5 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks, along with linebacker Marcus Hawkins, and they have both led a defense that have held opponents to just 20 points per game. Another test is in store this week for Sacramento State as they host nationally ranked Montana at Hornet Stadium for homecoming on Saturday. Another conference that has a surprise leader at the halfway mark is the OVC, who, while some have considered to be having a weak year nationally, has been very balanced in 2019. This has resulted with the Skyhawks of UT Martin leading the conference at 4-2 and 3-0 in the OVC after beating Tennessee Tech last week. Having already doubled last year's win total by week 7, 2019 will still be quite an improvement for UT Martin. But now the Skyhawks have their sights set on a spot in the FCS playoffs, which they have not done since 2006. While nothing explodes off the stat sheet, Coach Jason Simpson has a side that has been solid in every aspect of the game. And while they still may not be a factor on the national radar just yet, the OVC has certainly taken notice. Next week, UT Martin will host Eastern Illinois as they prepare for 2 massive games in conference against SEMO and Jacksonville State coming up on October 26th and November 2nd. The Pioneer League has over the last few years been dominated by San Diego, with the Toreros barely breaking a sweat in clinching their automatic bid to the FCS playoffs. But it appears that it will hardly be a walkover for San Diego this season because they have some company at the top of the standings in the form of the Drake Bulldogs and the Dayton Flyers. Drake started 0-3, including an embarrassing loss to D2 Truman, but since getting into conference play, the Bulldogs have dominated, winning 3 in a row. The Drake defense, who has had 5 preseason all-conference first-team defensive selections, have held opponents to 10 points per game in conference. Meanwhile, Dayton has been making a statement since week 1 when they defeated number 14 Indiana State. Dayton is 5th in the nation in scoring at 40.8 points per game and has allowed just 809 passing yards, which is good for 4th in the FCS. This week, Dayton will travel to Stetson, while Drake hosts Morehead State. Now here's another reason why you should choose FCS.
I think the FCS gives a student athlete a chance to really develop in the classroom and on the field. And I don't think there's anything that gets in the way of the development of the student athlete. Whereas in sometimes other conferences, other levels of play, I think there's some things that could sway a student athlete in a wrong direction here or there. But I think at the FCS level, I think it's all about the student athlete. I think it's all about his development in the classroom and also on the playing field. And it really it keeps your values and your goals right in front of you. And I think there's less things that are going to take you away from those things.
I'm Ike Abuchalam, and this is your football game plan Big Sky Conference whip around. This week, we'll be taking a deep dive into the team that was the pride of the conference last season, the Eastern Washington Eagles. What's happened to them? Last year, Eastern Washington was absolutely dominant, scoring 43 points per game, led by quarterback Eric Barriere, en route to a number 3 overall record at the end of the season. They only had one loss in conference play to Weber State, which was the only game that they scored in less than 24 points. The Eagles went on to breeze through the playoffs, at least until the championship game where they were defeated by the North Dakota State Bison. This year, there seems to be a bit of a hangover. To date, the Eagles have a 3-4 record moving into Week 8 with FCS losses to Jacksonville State, Idaho, and Sacramento State already. What has led to the change in the Eagles' fortunes? Quarterback Eric Barriere remains the starter under center. Their offense remains strong as they're ranked 2nd overall in total yards and 3rd overall in passing, according to Stats FCS. Where the major change has come from last season is in the defense. So far, the Eagles have one of the worst records overall in the FCS, with the unit ranked 114th in defense and 103rd in scoring. With 5 games remaining on the schedule, Eastern Washington has some time left to make a push for the playoffs. The offense needs to stay on pace in order to do so. Where change is necessary is on the defensive side of the ball, where returning all Big Sky players, defensive end Mitchell Johnson, defensive tackle Dylan Ledbetter, and safety Anthony Gurley have to step up to lead their fellow Eagles to victory. This has been your football game plan Big Sky Conference whip around. I'm Mike Abuchalam.
Week 8 in the Big South. It's not surprising to see number 6 Kennesaw State and Monmouth tied at the top of the conference's standings at 1-0. The Owls and the Hawks are the 2 teams that have won more games than anyone else over the last 2+ seasons. In that time span, they're a combined 20-2. Both losses were by Monmouth against Kennesaw in championship deciding games. The most surprising team so far has been the Campbell Fighting Camels. The team picked to finish 6th by Stats FCS in the conference. Campbell finished just 1-4 in the Big South last year in their debut season. The Fighting Camels come into Week 8 at 4-1 overall, riding a 4-game winning streak and a 1-0 conference record after beating the only team picked to finish behind them in the preseason poll, Presbyterian 28-14 last week. The Fighting Camels are led by 2-time Big South Freshman of the Week and Conference Rookie of the Year candidate Haj Malik Williams, their quarterback from Atlanta, who has completed over 62% of his passes for 963 yards and 10 scores. Williams also has 193 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Williams has relied a lot on his sophomore receivers, Caleb Sneed, who's caught 16 passes for 281 yards, and Devarius Bargner, who has 16 catches for 219 yards. The duo has also combined to catch 6 of Williams' 10 touchdowns. He also has 2 great running backs, Cameron Davis and Jonathan Hawkins, who each have over 230 yards on the ground to help balance out the offense. That Campbell offense is averaging 363.8 yards and 29 points per game. On defense, they allow over 420 total yards per game, but just 162.6 passing yards. This week will be the defense's toughest test as they host the 3-3 Hampton Pirates, the team picked to finish just ahead of them in the preseason poll. The Pirates are averaging 265 yards through the air, 463 total yards, and over 36 points per game. The Pirates are led by Florida State transfer DeAndre Francois. His 1,488 passing yards rank third in the conference, and his 14 passing touchdowns lead the Big South. If Campbell can win this game, they should be taken seriously in the conference going forward. If not, they could be looking at a long second half of the season with their schedule only getting harder. Either way, this is a young team that was playing in the non-scholarship Pioneer Football League just 2 seasons ago. That will do it for this week in the Big South. For the FCS Conference Whip Around, I'm Frank LaSala.
Northern Arizona travels to Weber State to take on the Wildcats. This could be considered a trap game for Weber, as Case Cookers and his Lumberjacks can definitely put points up on the board, but Weber has been just as strong defensively as they were last season despite all of their losses on that side of the ball, and they'll take care of business at home against Northern Arizona. Now we move over to the Big South, where Hampton and Campbell meet up in Bowie's Creek, North Carolina. Hampton has been an enigma all season long. You just don't know what you're going to get week to week from the Pirates. I do know what I will get from quarterback Kaj Malik Williams and the Camels defense, though, which is why I like them to move on to 5-1 after this weekend.
After another impressive win, it's hard not to see the similarities between James Madison this season and James Madison in 2016 when they won the national championship. Both years, the Dukes had a coach in his first year leading the team. In week 3 of the 2016 season, JMU lost to FBS's North Carolina and didn't lose another game. During their championship season, James Madison had a high-powered offense, scoring at least 30 points in all but 4 of their 15 games. Just as impressive was their defense, giving up 30 or more points in just 3 of their 15 games. JMU took advantage of their top run game and their ability to cause turnovers. While they weren't shy to completely dominate their opponents, they did get tested by a few of their CAA rivals. This season, the Dukes are now led by Kurt Signetti. Like in 2016, the Dukes have a high-powered offense, scoring at least 30 points in 6 of their 7 games. And their defense is just as strong, if not stronger, giving up more than 30 points just once so far this season. That includes holding opponents to 20 or less points in 5 of their 7 games. They fell early in week 1 against Signetti's alma mater, FBS's West Virginia, and haven't lost since, dominating their opponents except for being tested in back-to-back games by teams in the CAA. 2 weeks ago, it took overtime for the Dukes to squeak by Stony Brook. Now, while losing the turnover battle against the Seawolves, they used the ground game, rushing 56 times for 329 yards and scoring 5 touchdowns in the win. This past week, James Madison couldn't get the run game going, so they rode their defense to a win against Villanova. Despite being down going into the 4th quarter, they dominated the turnover battle, forcing a fumble and 3 interceptions, including an interception in the 4th to take the lead and ultimately win. While the coach and players are different, the teams are quite similar. Will we see a similar outcome to their season? If the Dukes can consistently use their run game and win the turnover battle, I think we'll see them fight for another national championship. For the FCS Whip Around, I'm Dylan Cieslik.
How's it going, everyone? I'm Zachary Morgan here with your Ivy League Whip Around. This weekend, we saw two of the league's heavyweights face off in Dartmouth and Yale, and what many expected to be a close game between the Big Green and the preseason favorite Bulldogs was not what we got. Instead, we got a blowout in favor of the Big Green, who would go on to be named the Stats FCS Team of the Week. The victory keeps their revenge tour alive and well for the Big Green, who are looking to avenge their only loss from last year against the reigning Ivy League champions, the Princeton Tigers. And the way it's shaping up, the 2019 matchup between these two squads will likely decide who's going to capture the Ivy League throne this year. But hold on, there's still a lot of football to be played until that matchup, and both these squads still have to play Harvard, who can't be overlooked just yet with the way their defense has been playing. The Crimson boasts the top-ranked defense in the FCS against the rush and are currently undefeated in Ivy League play. And while Harvard has looked strong since their Week 1 loss, their real test will start next week when they travel to Princeton, and then the week after when they host Dartmouth. If they can survive this potential trap game against Holy Cross this weekend, watch out. You can't rule them out against the Big Green or the Tigers just quite yet. With Football Game Plan in your Ivy League whip around, I'm Zachary Morgan. I'll see you next time.
New Hampshire and Delaware meet up in a top 25 battle. Quietly, the Wildcats look to be one of the surprise teams in the CAA and the FCS as a whole. It's been a strong defensive effort that has them 3-0 in conference play, 4-2 overall. Look for them to knock off the Blue Hens, who have been living on the edge for most of the season. Another game in the CAA to talk about is Rhode Island and Albany. The Rams have lost a few heartbreakers this season, but no one is going to feel sorry for them out there on the football field. Albany, like New Hampshire, has been one of the more surprising teams this season. Their offense can score, but look for their ground game to have success against the Rams and get the win. The Princeton Tigers take their show on the road against the Brown Bears, and Princeton's offense just keeps rolling along. Quarterback Kevin Davidson is one of the more accurate passers in the subdivision. This will be all about the Tigers' defense, though, as they'll get the best of their former offensive coordinator James Perry and the Brown Bears.
This week, all the talk in the MEAC will be focused on North Carolina A&T traveling to Florida A&M, which will be critical in deciding not only who will go to the Celebration Bowl, but whether or not a MEAC team takes a spot in the FCS playoffs. For A&T, running back U has its latest product in Jermaine Martin, who has been a force of nature for the Aggies this season and has significantly taken pressure off Elijah Bell to form a more complete offensive threat. Martin has averaged 148 yards per game this season and has accounted for 11 touchdowns in 2019. Khalil Carter has been a consistent dual threat, throwing no interceptions so far in the passing game, while averaging 4.8 yards per carry on the ground. A&T's offense has thrived in the second quarter, outscoring opponents 72-34, and the Aggie defense has also put up some good numbers this year, only allowing 21 points per game and recording 14 sacks this season. For FAMU, the story has been quarterback Ryan Stanley, who has been a fantastic leader so far this season. Stanley has completed 61% of his passes with 13 touchdowns, but his biggest attribute has been closing out games on the final drive. Wide receiver Xavier Smith and David Manigo have been the main targets this year for Stanley, with both averaging over 75 yards per game through the air. On defense, Marquise Bell has been a standout, not only as the second leading tackler, but also recording 4 tackles for loss and 3 interceptions. FAMU has to improve on defense, however, as they've been outscored this year 190-184. In this matchup, keep an eye on Stanley and the Rattlers' O-line against the front 7 of the Aggies. If the Rattlers want to disrupt A&T's title hopes, they will have to keep Ryan Stanley on the field and keep Jermaine Martin off it. With FAMU ineligible for postseason play this year, a win over A&T would open the door for Bethune-Cookman to take their place as the Celebration Bowl favorites out of the MEAC. For the FCS Conference Whip Around, I'm David Hassagen.
Over in the Missouri Valley Conference, keep an eye on the South Dakota Coyotes. Winners of 3 straight games, the Coyotes have firmly put themselves in a position to be a serious player in the Valley down the stretch. Now, coming off of an impressive performances against Northern Colorado, Indiana State, and Missouri State, the Coyotes set up a big showdown this weekend against Northern Iowa. Quarterback Austin Simmons has his offense rolling right now, completing 68% of his passes for over 1,600 yards with 14 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions, including an additional 3 touchdowns on the ground. They still have Northern Iowa, North Dakota State, Youngstown State, and South Dakota State left to play, but the Coyotes get both Youngstown State and the Jackrabbits at home and control their own destiny, which is all you can ask for. So let's look at that matchup against Northern Iowa. This will be a strength versus strength game as the Panthers defense is smothering, and we already talked about the offense of South Dakota. I think the defense of UNI does a great job of affecting the pocket, and we'll probably see more Austin Simmons on the move this week, and we'll learn a lot about the Coyotes defense as well. I think this will be a week where the Coyotes can keep the good vibes going as they'll go into the UNI Dome and get the win. Huge game in the MEAC between North Carolina A&T and Florida A&M. Even though the Rattlers are not eligible for postseason play, they're still eligible to play spoiler in the conference the rest of the way. You have to give credit to head coach Willie Simmons for the job he's done this year with the squad, but they won't be able to upset the 10th ranked Aggies in this one. Running back Jermaine Martin has been on a tear so far this season and should have another great game this weekend. Central Connecticut State, who are 5-1 on the season, has removed the interim tag from head coach Ryan McCarthy and named him the official head coach this week. McCarthy has done a fantastic job so far with this Blue Devils program, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Central Connecticut State has averaged 437 yards a game and 31.5 points per game this season, nearly knocking off Eastern Michigan of the FBS in the process. Coach McCarthy took over for Pete Rosamondo this season, who stepped down in order to take a coaching job at Rutgers. Now, the longtime QB coach and second-year OC took over the program that was looking to replace their NFL quarterback Jake Dolegala and some key defensive pieces, only to have the Blue Devils look prime for a playoff run this year. Now, the schedule sets up nicely for Central, and they won't get another true test until the final game of the season against Duquesne, which could be for both the NEC crown and a playoff berth. The Jacksonville State Gamecocks are on a 2-game winning streak and are still in the mix for the Ohio Valley Conference title. We know their offense can score. We know they have tremendous talent defensively, especially in the secondary. What we don't know is which team will show up on game day each and every week. Head coach John Gross does a great job of getting his guys prepared to play, but for whatever reason, the Gamecocks can be a bit inconsistent on Saturdays. Now, with the way the rest of the schedule sets up for them, in conjunction with how both UT Martin and Austin Peay are playing right now, they can't afford any more losses if they want to keep pace not only in the conference, but not potentially lose a stranglehold on one of the FCS playoff at-large bids. They have a big one this weekend against Southeast Missouri State. And we'll start with that game against the Red Hawks, and it's simple as, can Jacksonville State's defense get off the field on third down, and can their offense eliminate the mental mistakes that eventually become physical ones against SEMO? Now, for the Red Hawks, it'll be up to their offense's ability to maximize their drives with touchdowns. Field goals won't beat JSU, and I don't think we'll see them be able to keep pace with the Gamecocks. I like Jacksonville State. Duquesne and Sacred Heart meet up in a pivotal battle in the NEC. Even though the Pioneers have lost 2 straight games, they still pose a formidable challenge to the Duquesne Dukes. Now, where the Dukes have the advantage is at the skill positions, and while I foresee a tough back and forth affair for about a half, look for Duquesne to pull away in the second half and get the win.
Hey folks, it's Scott Schertzen here for the FCS Patriot League Whip Around. I've got two stories I want to cover this week. Kicking things off, I want to talk about the Georgetown D for a minute. In 2017, when Kevin Doherty took over as defensive coordinator, the Hoya defense averaged 27 points a game, en route to a 1-10 overall record. 2018, that average dropped to 21 when they had an overall 5-6 record that year. This year, however, fourth in the FCS with 13 points a game, fourth in the FCS with average defensive yards per game, and seventh with just 10 touchdowns, averaging 2.5 turnovers a game and 59 points this season resulting from turnovers. And lastly, just 32 second half points when teams typically start giving up more points. Defense wins championships, Bear Bryant. If they're going to win a title, it's going to be on the strength of that defense, not in the running game, not in the passing game, but definitely that defense. A defense, however, that has been on the field on average more than half of the game throughout this year. They have 3 more games this week before a week off, so this is going to be a huge test before the end of the month, even against lower-end conference opponents. No rest for the weary, as they say, and I'm curious if they're going to start showing some cracks in the armor after they gave up 30 points in that loss to Fordham last week. But it's an absolute testament to Kevin Doherty how that defense has improved, and I have loved following the Hoyas this season. On the other end of the spectrum, Colgate is having an impossible year. Last year, they went 6-0 in conference, 10-2 overall, and went to the quarterfinals where they lost to North Dakota State. But they lost arguably the best player on either end of the ball in James Holland and TJ Hall. Holland averaged over 100 yards a game rushing and scored 12 of the team's 28 rushing touchdowns. He graduated and the team dropped from 190 yards on running every game to 90. They also dropped from 2.3 rushing touchdowns a game to an even 1. TJ Hall went to Louisville for his senior year. He had 121 tackles last year, including 17 for a loss and 3.5 sacks, and was the Patriot League's Defensive Player of the Year. Last year, the Raiders averaged 237 yards a game on defense. This year, 399. Last year's defense, just over 9 points a game. This year, 35. However, I expect next year to be vastly improved, and that's a story I'll be covering in the coming weeks. But for now, for the FCS Whip Around, I'm Scott Schertzen. Stay awesome.
I'm Alex Marinoni with your Week 8 Pioneer League coverage. Now, last week I mentioned that the winner of the San Diego and Davidson game could be the eventual winner of the conference. With San Diego's dominance over the conference and current stranglehold, there's a good chance that they could come out again as champs. But should this mean that no other team from the Pioneer League should be even considered for an at-large bid? Historically, the Pioneer League only gets the conference winner into the playoff, but this could be the year that has warranted more than one. The Davidson Wildcats and Dayton Flyers have been bowling out this year, and not just in conference. Despite Davidson's loss this past week, they are 2-1 in out-of-conference play, with their one loss coming in the hands of Campbell, a team that is currently sitting second in the Big South, just behind powerhouse Kennesaw State. Davidson currently owns the number 6 overall defense in the entire FCS and has the running game to keep any game that they are in very close. The Dayton Flyers currently sport a 4-1 overall record, which includes a perfect 2-0 conference record. In out-of-conference play, they beat Indiana State, a team that took an FBS team in Kansas down to the wire in just a 7-point loss, and lost to Duquesne, who has garnered a top 25 vote themselves. With the quarterback play from Jack Cook and the dominance of tight end Adam Troutman, the Dayton Flyers have an offense that can play with anyone. Right out the gates, these 3 teams have impressed in the Pioneer League, specifically with how they stack up in out-of-conference play. Now, there's a lot of season left to go, but if these 3 teams are hovering somewhere between 9-2 and 10-1 to end the year, there should be a legitimate case for at least 2 of them to get in. San Diego has the leg up on things, taking down Davidson this past week, but all that could change if Dayton can shock San Diego 2 weeks from now. What could really make this interesting for the conference is a surprise team coming in and stealing a win. Right now, the Drake Bulldogs sit atop of the conference at 3-0 in conference play, but 3-3 overall. 2 of those losses, though, were up against some of the best FCS has to offer in North Dakota and number 3 South Dakota State. A lot can happen here, but say Drake holds everyone off. Should this mean that because of one hiccup, a powerhouse like San Diego should be on the outside looking in? There is a legitimate discussion to be had to consider more than just a conference champ in the Pioneer League for the playoffs. They are stacking up with the better teams in the FCS and have some legit professional talent on their teams. If the dominance continues, there should be real consideration. For the Pioneer League, I'm Alex Marinoni.
Over in the Patriot League, both Lehigh and Fordham find themselves in the thick of the league race as both come in this game unbeaten in Patriot League play. Fordham is coming off of a thrilling win against Georgetown, while the Mountain Hawks knocked off Colgate last weekend. I think last week's win for Fordham was a huge boost of confidence for this offensive line. I do like the Rams in this game. Their offense looks to be hitting its stride and should make things very interesting down the stretch in the Patriot League. Now we have a big game in the Pioneer League between Dayton and Stetson. Now the Hatters are on a tear right now, playing some really good football once again this season. This is going to be a statement game for them, a chance to get a landmark victory against the Flyers. I just don't see it happening this year, as Dayton is much more explosive offensively and are one of the more battle-tested teams in the Pioneer League, and I think they'll avoid the letdown in D-Land, Florida.
Troy Anthony bringing you your football game plan whip around for the Southern Conference. This week I have to give you a player profile on Alex Ramsey, running back for the VMI Keydets. Ramsey was named Player of the Week for his performance in the Keydets' first ever win versus Samford. He rushed for 163 yards and 6 touchdowns on 37 carries. With the 6 touchdowns setting a new school record, 4 of them came in the first half. Ramsey is killing it right now. He currently leads the FCS in rushing yards with 810. He also leads the FCS in rushing touchdowns with 15. The Walter Payton Award annually goes to the most outstanding offensive player in the FCS. Last year's award went to Devlin Hodges of Samford, who threw for 4,283 yards and 32 touchdowns. Devlin, you might recognize. He started this week's last game for the Pittsburgh Steelers and led them to the victory against the Chargers. Ramsey is making a strong case to keep the Walter Payton Award right here in the SoCon. This week, the Keydets visit the 2-4 Mercer Bears. Ramsey looks to continue his dominance on the ground, as Mercer is ranked 104th in rushing defense, allowing an average of 214 yards on the ground a game. He is averaging 5.13 yards per carry, and that Bears defense is allowing 4.18 yards per carry. So Alex should be in store for another monster game. Bringing your football game plan whip around for the SoCon, I'm Troy Anthony.
I'm Dan McGillicuddy for Football Game Plan with the Southland Conference Week 8 Whip Around. In the Southland preseason poll, the Houston Baptist Huskies were picked to finish dead last. They completed back-to-back 1-10 seasons and haven't had a winning season in their 5 years of existence. This year's Husky team has caught my eye, as they were putting on a ton of points on the board and winning games. Although they've lost 2 in a row, the season thus far has been successful. This may be the year the tide turns. The Huskies are 4-3 overall and 1-2 in the conference. A high-powered offense led by quarterback Bailey Zapp has carried them to early season success. They're averaging 45 points per game. Their offense stumbled 2 weeks ago with 36 points, and last week only mustered 20, both conference losses. The Huskies beat up on non-conference opponents, and their real test awaits in conference play. There is plenty to like and to be excited about, as they've already doubled their win totals from the last 2 seasons. have an exciting offense as well as a strong defense. Zap is completing 70% of his passes, averaging 353 yards passing per game, with 25 TDs and 10 interceptions on the season. The challenge awaits with 5 games left, 3 on the road. Zap has thrown 3 interceptions in his last 2 games and needs to find his early season mojo to get the Huskies back on the winning track. The Huskies need to improve on protecting Zap and the other quarterbacks as they've been sacked 22 times in 7 games. Time of possession, or TOP, isn't awful, but could use improvement. They hold the ball for 28 minutes per game. 2 factors that contribute to a lower TOP are a quick strike offense and a 43.56% third down conversion success rate. A slight uptick on converting third down will improve TOP and help out the young defense. Defensively, the Huskies get after it. They are aggressive and create havoc. Defensive end Andre Walker, along with linebackers Khalib Johnson and Brennan Young, spearhead the unit. Walker has 10 sacks, Johnson has 5, and Johnson leads the conference in tackles with 70, and Young is at 66 while collecting 2 interceptions. The Husky D has forced 16 turnovers. They hold teams to a 4.1 yard per carry average, but give up an average of 309 yards in the air. If they can tighten up the pass D while maintaining the turnover rate, the second half of this season, they may see more victories. Not much was expected from the Huskies, as indicated by their early preseason ranking. They have battled, improved, and look to turn the tide this year. Teams need to catch some breaks to be successful. Hopefully the early season success leads to a late season flourish. The second half of this season will be a success if the offense continues to produce points, they improve on time of possession, and they improve on ball security. The defense needs to continue to pressure the quarterback, force turnovers, and tighten up in the secondary. I expect the Huskies to be in every game. The season is a success already, but the taste of victory leaves a team wanting more. They are young and hungry. With a break here and there, maybe the Huskies make some hay, get in the playoffs, and shock all those who picked them to finish last. For Football Game Plan, I'm Dan McGillicuddy. Enjoy the games, everyone.
Down in the SoCon, the Citadel Bulldogs and Furman Paladins hit the gridiron this weekend. The Bulldogs have gone from beating Georgia Tech one week to losing to both Sanford and VMI. Now, they did get back on the winning track last weekend against Western Carolina, but the Paladins are a dangerous group on both sides of the ball. I like Furman to keep on trucking. They have the look of a team that's primed to make a deep run in the playoffs. 2 big games in the Southland Conference, and we'll start with the Battle of Cardinals as Lamar and Incarnate Word meet up in San Antonio. Lamar's defense has started to play better in recent weeks, which has been directly tied to the 2-game winning streak that they're on. It'll be a challenge this weekend as Incarnate Word can stretch the field both horizontally and vertically. Now, defensively for the boys from San Antonio, they've got the ability to turn the ball over, and that'll be the key in a win against Lamar. Nichols heads out to Sam Houston State to battle with the Bearcats, and the Colonels have been one of the more consistent squads this season in the Southland Conference. While it has been a bit of balance on offense, their defense, as it has gotten healthier, has gotten stronger every week. And I think they'll stymie Sam Houston State in which should be the best game of the weekend in the Southland Conference.
This week, we're going to do things a little different and take a look at the SWAC conference standings with an emphasis on the teams that nobody is looking at. With Alcorn State sitting atop the SWAC Eastern Conference at 3-0 and 5-0 overall, is this the year, finally, that Alabama State Hornets, who are 2-1 in conference play, make the leap to take the division? The Arkansas Pine Bluff Golden Lions, who are 5-2 overall and 2-1 in conference play, are in the driver's seat in the West with nobody taking notice. For Alabama State, it's their defense who drives this team to success. The Hornets defense right now is currently ranked 8th overall in passing yards per game allowed, as well as top 40 in yards per game. Alabama State hasn't been able to string together back-to-back wins yet this season, and next week have their hands full trying to contain Alabama A&M running back Jordan Bentley, who is averaging more than 100 yards per game and 1 touchdown per game. Look to expect a low-scoring, hard-hitting battle where whoever has the ball last in this game could possibly decide the final outcome. Now let's take a quick look in the West, where Arkansas Pine Bluff is sitting exactly where they want to be, right behind Southern in the second place, even though they have 2 more wins overall. The Golden Lions will rely heavy on their offensive line play and continue to run the football with star running back Taylor Porter, who has 9 rushing touchdowns and 660 yards so far this season. Arkansas Pine Bluff knows how to put points on the board, and right now we're ranked 3rd overall in touchdowns with 34 and 8th overall in yards with over 3,000. All in all, there are some big games this week in SWAC Conference overall play, with a slew of games holding a lot of weight towards overall standings. Alabama State Hornets will be looking to cut the separation with Alcorn State in the East, as Arkansas Pine Bluff is right on the heels of Southern in the West. It's going to be a good weekend of sports in the SWAC, and I'm ready for it. I'm JJ Josephson with the SWAC Whip Around.
Interesting game down in the SWAC between Jackson State and Mississippi Valley State. I say interesting because both teams are winless in conference, but they are playing some competitive ball despite their record. I think Valley is a year away from being a potential player in the conference, and I like them in this ball game in that interstate rival against Jackson State. The Delta Devils can run the ball really well, and Jackson State's defense is highly suspect in that regard, so look for Valley to pull off the upset and get the win.
I think that the main reason to choose HBCU is for the family atmosphere. The guys are going to get the core values that their parents taught them, that their family members tried to raise them. You'll have a close-knit atmosphere. You'll actually have guys that care about you as a person. So I think that's the main reason for choosing the HBCU.
It's now time for our Stats FCS Game of the Week preview, and this week we have a huge game in the Big Sky Conference between Montana and Sacramento State. Let's start with the Grizzlies in this game. Their offense can run with anyone in the FCS. Quarterback Dalton Snead is playing really good football right now, and they are excellent inside the red zone. The biggest challenge in this game for them will be up front along the Grizzlies' offensive line. They face one of the top pass rushers in the FCS in George Obena, and that Hornets defensive line does a great job of affecting the pocket. Sacramento State's quarterback Kevin Thompson is enjoying a nice season himself as well. Their passing game is what causes problems for opposing teams, and a lot of their big plays come off their ability to threaten the defense with Thompson's ability as a runner. Defensively, they've been a consistent nuisance to opponents this season, and it's been a perfect blend of complementary football for the Hornets. I do like Sacramento State in this ball game. This team has played consistently throughout the season, no matter the opponent, and they'll put together another fine effort and get the win at home. So that's it for this week's episode of the FCS Kickoff. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, and be sure to check out and subscribe on iTunes to the Football Game Plan's FCS Opening Drive podcast, where David Hashagen and myself will keep you up to date to what's going on around the FCS.